Today I will be talking about World War II. I've chosen a number of photographs which highlight the key events throughout the war. There are photos that I've chosen that I think either indicate key events or are interesting. I'll begin with Hitler and the rise of the Nazi Party. As a brief introduction, I don't think it's necessary just to set the context for the beginning of the war. Thank you. Adolf Hitler joined the German Workers' Party in 1919, and his influence over the party was immediate. He helped develop the 25-point plan which outlined his and the party's future aims, which included the destruction of the Treaty of Versailles, desire for living space, and a desire to unite all German-speaking peoples. The party was renamed the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis for short, and they adopted the swastika as part of the party symbol. Hitler became the leader of the party in July 1921, and in November 1921 it set up the SA, which was the military wing of the Nazi Party, who are better known as the Brown Shirts because of their distinctive uniform. The support of the party rose, and by 1922 they had approximately 15,000 members. In November 1923, Hitler and the Nazis attempted to gain power by force in what became known as the Munich Putsch. It failed and Hitler was arrested as a result. He did, however, use the media coverage during his trial to spread his ideas. Sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, he was released after 9 months and decided to use politics to gain power by standing for election. And by 1933, Hitler became the German Chancellor through a variety of factors. The enactment of a new law which merged the positions of Chancellor and President in August 1934, coupled with the death of President Hindenburg, afforded Hitler the title of Führer, or Leader of Germany. Within 18 months of becoming Chancellor, Hitler had legally turned Germany into a totalitarian state. As we are focusing on World War II in this lesson, we'll discuss Hitler's foreign policy. It can be covered in 3 main aims, which he outlined in his book Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. Firstly was the restoration of the German military, which had been weakened by the Treaty of Versailles. Secondly, he wished to unite all those claiming German nationality into the Third Reich, and he also wanted to create Lebensraum, or living space, by acquiring new territory from people who he believed were racially inferior in Central and Eastern Europe. This especially meant Russia, and the aim was to support the needs of the growing population. At first, Hitler moved cautiously in his foreign policy, but within a few years he became more and more bold in his actions. In 1935, he established the German Air Force, known as the Luftwaffe. He expanded the German army and introduced conscription to Germany. In 1936, he reoccupied the Rhineland, which is in direct contravention of the Treaty of Versailles. In 1938, he made a union, or an Anschluss, with Austria. He also acquired the Sudetenland, a region in the Czechoslovakia, through the Munich Agreement, and then broke the Munich Agreement by invading the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. In response, Great Britain issued a statement guaranteeing Poland's independence and stating that if Germany attacked, Great Britain would come to the aid of Poland. The Nazis, however, signed a pact with the Soviet Union, and both Hitler and Stalin agreed to divide Poland between themselves. On the 1st of September 1939, Hitler invaded. On the 3rd of September 1939, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany as a result, beginning the Second World War. From the photos I have selected, shown in the left-hand corner, is a newspaper article from the Daily Mirror with the headline "Hitler in Power, Made German Chancellor." In the bottom left you can see Hitler, outlined here, and seated with President Hindenburg. You can also see in the top right hand corner, outlined here, a Nuremberg Rally, and it includes a photo of SS troops, which were the elite corps combat troops in the Nazi regime and were essentially Hitler's bodyguard. In the bottom right hand corner you can see Hitler in his victorious entry into Vienna after the Anschluss in 1938 with Austria. In the top left hand picture you can see Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, in 1939. In his hand you can see a piece of paper which he is saying "in peace in our time", and he is saying this because he has just come from the Munich Agreement in 1938, in which he had assurances from Hitler that peace would be maintained in Europe. Obviously, Hitler then breaks this Munich Agreement with the invasion of the rest of Czechoslovakia, as mentioned, and then, despite warnings from Great Britain, he invades Poland in 1939 on the 1st of September, and in response, on the 3rd of September, war is declared on Germany, as you can see from the headlines in the Sunday Express. We will now turn our attention to the East. Following the signing of the Nazi-Soviet Pact and the subsequent division of Poland between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union now turned its attention to Finland, and began the Winter War between the two countries in the 3rd of November 1939. The League of Nations condemned the attack and expelled the Soviet Union on the 14th of December 1939 as a response. The Soviets wanted some Finnish territory in exchange for land elsewhere, and the aim was primarily security reasons, specifically the protection of Leningrad, which was only 32 kilometres or 20 miles from the Finnish border. The photo I have chosen today is of a Finnish sniper known as Simo Häyhä, and he gained the nickname the White Death from the Soviets because of his proficiency. He amassed over 500 kills, and as you can see from his face, he suffered from disfigurement from an attack. It exploded in through his mouth. Throughout the war, the Finnish troops held very bravely, and the Finnish Fourth Army retreated to a place called Kola, and they lasted until the end of the war. And the motto "Kola holds" becomes a legendary motto among Finns. Simo also served on the Kola front during the war with Russia. Following these declarations of war, there was an 8-month period in the Western Front where there was no major military land operations between either side. On May the 10th, 1940, however, Germany attacked Western Europe with the primary goal of conquering France. German bombers hit bases in France, Luxembourg, Belgium and the Netherlands. On the ground, German troops advanced in two directions. One way through Netherlands and Belgium, where Great Britain and France had expected, and the other, larger force, to the south through Luxembourg and into the Ardennes forest, on a path which led directly to the French heartland. Unaware of southern advances, Great Britain and France sent the bulk of their troops to Belgium. The Netherlands soon fell, and the line of forts from Liège to Antwerp had been taken by Germans. The attack from the south from the Ardennes forest left the Allies trapped, southern forces out of France and the Great British forces further weakening them. The British Expeditionary Force was pushed to the coast, and the decision to evacuate at Dunkirk was made. It was called Operation Dynamo, and it took place on May the 27th, 1940. In 1 week, 800 civilian and military sea vessels were involved in the operation to remove 300,000 men who had to be brought back across the Channel under constant bombardment from the Luftwaffe, leaving France completely on its own. On the 22nd of June 1940, France signed an armistice with Germany. Hitler insisted it be done in the same railway car which Germany surrendered to France in 1918 at the end of the First World War. The photos which I have chosen outline the event which I have just described. In the top left hand corner shows a man weeping at the fall of Paris to the Germans. The top right hand corner shows Hitler and other leading Nazis at a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And the pictures in the bottom left hand and bottom right hand corners show the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force from Dunkirk. Following their successes on the European mainland, Germany now turned its attention to the United Kingdom. From the 10th of July to the 31st of October 1940, the Battle of Britain commenced. It lasted for a total of 3 months and 3 weeks. The aim was to gain aerial control of the skies over the United Kingdom to launch an amphibious and airborne invasion of Britain known as Operation Sea Lion. However, Nazi Germany continued bombing campaigns in Great Britain known as the Blitz following their failure in the Battle of Britain. You can see from the photos beneath that I have chosen, there's just a few planes from the Battle of Britain. You can also see the devastation from the Blitz, specifically in Belfast, where almost 1,000 people were killed as a result of 4 primary raids on the city. You can also see the famous quote from the Prime Minister Winston Churchill: "Never was so much owed by so many to so few." We will now turn our attention to America, and specifically the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese Imperial Air Force on the 7th of December 1941. They targeted the headquarters of the US Pacific Fleet in a surprise attack before 8 a.m. in the morning, and it was the immediate cause of the United States entry into the Second World War. All 8 US Navy battleships damaged, 4 of them sunk, all but the USS Arizona were later raised. 6 of the 8 were continued to be used in battle. You can see in the photo in the bottom left hand corner, that is the sunken remains of the Arizona. Obviously the photos at the top left and right hand corner are photos from the attack itself. You can see some of the devastation involved. There's a Japanese submarine captain captured. His name was Kazuo Sakamaki, and he tried to complete suicide as a result of before he was captured. He was knocked unconscious. Important for later because he was the first Japanese prisoner of war, and he requested that he be allowed to complete suicide whilst being held at Sand Island. On the Arizona ship, as I've mentioned here in the bottom left hand corner, it had 1,176 dead, and it is currently still the resting place of 1,102 Americans. The president at the time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the following day he declared war on Japan. His famous quote is, on the right hand bottom corner, is "Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan." Following this declaration of war, Germany and Italy declared war on the 11th of December on America, which America reciprocated on the same day as a result. In 1941, the German military machine turned their attention to Russia in the east and launched their invasion called Operation Barbarossa, with the aim of developing Lebensraum for the German people. One of the main turning points in the war between Russia and Germany was the Battle of Stalingrad, which lasted from November 1942 till December 1943. Within this battle, I have specifically chosen to concentrate on a sniper called Vasily Zaitsev. There was a movie made about him called Enemy at the Gates. He is known for killing 225 men, including 11 enemy German snipers. And on the 22nd of February 1943, he was rewarded with the Hero of the Soviet Union award for his bravery in the war. This was a turning point, as I said, for the USSR, and they began to push Germany as a result of the Battle of Stalingrad. I'd also like to turn your attention just to the right. The photo I've chosen also is Ludmila Chanko. The reason I've chosen her is because she had over 300 kills, approximately 309 confirmed kills, and it's just to show that there were a number of female snipers who were successful in the Soviet army also in this period. Within the war, as I'm sure you know, there were many prisoners of war, combatants who were captured by the enemy and then imprisoned. The photo in the top left hand corner is an interesting one because it shows Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, being stared down by a prisoner of war in one of the camps. His name is apparently Horace Greasley, and his stories come into question, but he allegedly escaped camp as many as 200 times in which he was being held to visit a local girl in a German village who he had struck a relationship with. Apparently the story within the camp is that a couple of the men told him to go up to Heinrich Himmler and say that they weren't being fed enough, and he took his top off to show him how thin he was and that they needed more food. The other photos I've chosen are from Stalag Luft III, which you maybe heard from the movie Great Escape. The photo on the bottom left hand side is called The Wooden Horse. It was an escape attempt by 3 men called Codner, William and Philpott, who escaped and eventually returned to Great Britain. Essentially what their plan was, it was a false bottom or false door in the wooden horse, and they would spend time digging a tunnel out, and eventually they obviously did. Within the movie The Great Escape, there was 3 tunnels planned to be dug called Tom, Dick and Harry. Harry, as you can see, is the only one that was completed, as you can see in the top right hand photo, and it was the aim to get as many prisoners of war out as possible from the camp. 76 escaped in total, 50 were murdered upon recapture, and 3 only out of the 76 actually made it to safety. They used some of the other tunnels to conceal men and tools, and one of the tunnels was discovered by the Germans. There were also troops held by Japan. As many as 140,000 prisoners were held in all, and 1 in 3 died from starvation or overwork or punishment or disease or a number of other factors. Malnutrition was another issue for the prisoners being held in Japan because they were underfed, as I've alluded to earlier. In some cases, troops were being fed as little as 600 calories a day. The terms of the Geneva Convention were ignored by and large, and rules and punishments were made up at the whim of the camp commandant. One of the more infamous experiences is the Bataan Death March. In 1942, US surrendered the Bataan Peninsula on the main Filipino island of Luzon, and approximately 75,000 Filipino and US troops were forced to march approximately 55 miles to the prisoner camps, with the march resulting in the death of 7,000 men. Those who suffered some of the worst were sent to build the Burma to Thailand railway, and they were expected to work from dawn to dusk, 10 days on and 1 day off. Approximately 10,000 died as a result of treatment within this area. On the 6th of June 1944, Operation Overlord, better known as D-Day, commenced. 156,000 Allied troops landed on the first day of the invasion on the Normandy beaches, with the aim to reclaim Europe and push Germany back. 4,413 Allied soldiers died on D-Day alone. Within 5 days, 326,547 troops had landed. You can see these from the photos. The photo in the top left hand corner is probably the most famous. It shows some troops ready to land on the Normandy beaches. The photos in the top right hand corner and the bottom left show the expeditionary forces after the first day of fighting. And the photo on the bottom right hand side I find interesting because of this man here. His name is Mad Jack Churchill, and he said that he always had to carry a sword with him, or else he felt an officer was improperly dressed. He is actually carrying a clay bag, which is a single-handed claymore. It is also important to note that within Germany there was some opposition. The most famous example of this is the 1944 plot, or the 20th of July plot, to assassinate Hitler in the Wolf's Lair. This is better known as Operation Valkyrie, from the movie you may have seen. The man on the right is Klaus Gank von Stauffenberg. He was the one that carried the briefcase which led to the bomb being planted within the Wolf's Lair. As you can see on the left hand side, the devastation afterwards. 4 leading Nazis were killed as a result, however Hitler survived the blast. The aim was to seize political control of Germany and to make peace with the Western Allies. Failure, however, led to the arrest of at least 7,000 by the Gestapo, of whom 4,980 were executed, including Stauffenberg. A number of other conspirators completed suicide rather than be caught and tortured by the Gestapo. The Americans were also successful in the Pacific Theatre. The photo in the top left hand corner is a photo by Joe Rosenthal, and it's a famous photo because it shows the erection of the American flag on Mount Suribachi on the island of Iwo Jima following the success of the US Marine Corps. They landed and captured the island at great cost, with 7,000 US soldiers being killed and 18,000 Japanese soldiers also being killed. In 1945, the Americans also developed the atomic bomb through the Manhattan Project led by Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. The photo in the left hand corner also shows the plane which dropped the 2 atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The plane is called the Enola Gay. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima was called Little Boy, and the bomb that destroyed Nagasaki 3 days later was called Fat Boy. In the bottom right hand corner it shows the Japanese surrender on the USS Missouri. The photos chosen above show some of the personal belongings of the victims of the Holocaust, also known as the Shoah. During World War II, the Nazis decided on a policy of systematically murdering ethnic Poles, Slavs, Soviet prisoners of war, Romanis, communists, Freemasons, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and as many as 6 million Jews, 1.5 million of which were children, in the deadliest genocide in the history of mankind. The decision to systematically exterminate the Jewish population of Europe was made at the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. Some of the leading figures in the Nazi regime who were there included Reinhard Heydrich, who was the right-hand man of the leader of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, and also Adolf Eichmann. He escaped actually to Argentina after the war and was later captured by Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, in 1960, found guilty of war crimes and then hanged in 1962. The photo in the top left-hand corner is from Auschwitz, and it shows the symbol within the door, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. And you can also see some of the personal belongings, as I alluded to earlier, in the remainder of the photos. So these are shoes up in the right-hand corner, glasses in the right-hand corner, and rings in the bottom left-hand corner. If you want to gain more information on this area, some books I would maybe recommend would include The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, The Diary of Anne Frank, or Mouse. Just to finish, I've selected a few photos from the end of the war. The photo in the top left-hand corner shows the erection of the Soviet flag by a Soviet soldier on the German parliament, the Reichstag. It's an interesting photo because it was actually doctored later on, as the soldier had two watches on. They photoshopped one of the watches out because they didn't want to tarnish the image. Essentially, they were looting after the war. The photo in the top right-hand corner is the famous Times Square kiss from a soldier and a nurse. This was to celebrate VJ Day, or Victory in Japan Day. The photo in the bottom right hand corner, which I'm trying to enlarge for you right now, is a photo of Dick Winters and Easy Company from the movie or the HBO TV series Band of Brothers. This is members of the 101st Airborne at Hitler's Austrian hideaway. The photo just in the middle here, which I'll also expand, is a photo of a German soldier returning home, and he's finding that his family and his home is not there anymore. It's just to show that the personal losses on the German side also. The photos on the bottom left hand side show two women, and essentially after the war in the occupied states in Europe, people who collaborated with the Nazis or maybe had relations with the Nazis were severely punished. So their heads were shaved, and swastikas, for example, were placed on their foreheads and their faces. I hope you have found this presentation informative. It is now your task to choose 10 photos or 10 events from World War II and explain them. Some topics you might want to address, which I haven't touched on, would be the Native American windtalkers, the war in Africa, animals in war, the weird weapons that were used throughout the war, Operation Paperclip, which was at the end of the war when the Germans scientists were taken over to the west,